May 7th, 2017, Carlisle, Ohio. 18-year-old varsity cheerleader Brooke Skylar Richardson gave birth at home and buried her newborn daughter in the backyard of her parents' house. 2 months later, she described what had happened to her doctor, who informed police. Richardson was ultimately charged with aggravated murder, child endangerment, involuntary manslaughter, and abuse of a corpse. Today, we look back into this case and deep dive into the investigation, the testimony, and the verdict. Ultimately, we ask the question, was justice served in this case? Today, we find out together. This is BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded Throwback, Ohio versus Richardson. And it begins right now. And a good Sunday evening and late afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this special throwback edition of BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded. I'm Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw. So good to have everybody in the house on this Sunday. And I want to again thank all of you for your submissions for this series of throwback cases that captured our attention, if not the entire world's attention. So before we get started, a quick bit of house cleaning. I've taken the liberty of dropping in everything. Again, I want to thank you all for joining me. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and comment on everything you see and hear in this. If you wish to join the open panel, it is wide open. I would love to hear from you because this is a case and a half here. For everybody in the chat, remember all your comments, statements, and views are all speculation, deduction, theory, and opinion. They are not considered fact unless you have some facts you want to drop in of your own. Also, your opinions are welcome here. Any attacks against other chatters in the chat are not. If you don't like what somebody has to say, all you gotta do is hit the three little dots next to their name, hit the block, and bam, you're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and get this out the way and get it over with. This is your copyright disclaimer, and that way I can't get in trouble. First of all right, we got that. This is your trigger warning because this is one of those cases that could trigger your that could trigger issues with your mental health. Please, if you're not comfortable with this case, I'm suggesting you do not watch it. As it says at the end, viewer discretion is strongly advised. And considering all the where this is coming from, this is all coming courtesy of Court TV. your front row seat to justice, and a huge shout out to Court TV for their coverage of this case. All right. Now that we got everything set up, let me begin by sharing the screen here. And we are going to kick things off with this quick 1-minute preview of the case in chief before we get things underway.
Brooke Skylar Richardson. She was a former cheerleader, a high school senior, and it's just a couple of days after prom.
If members of the community were to find out
that she gave birth,
that was something that simply was not going to be accepted.
You did a horrible thing.
I didn't kill her.
The defense here is the child was stillborn.
The prosecution says Richardson's baby was born alive. She deliberately killed her baby, then buried her in the backyard.
She's 38 to 40 weeks pregnant. Significant number of people had suspicion.
It's the trial that's gripping the nation.
This case was about a massive rush to judgment.
I'm scared.
Can prosecutors prove homicidal violence caused the death of this little baby girl?
Huge thank you to Vinnie Politan for giving us that awesome opening for this case, and I've taken some notes from a Wikipedia entry, so I want to read a little bit of this before we get started. As you've already heard, Brooke Skylar Richardson attended Carlisle High School in Carlisle, Ohio, where she was a varsity cheerleader. She became pregnant during her senior year of high school. After her first gynecology appointment, Richardson was told that she was pregnant and would be giving birth in a few weeks. After hearing this news, Brooke cried out loud, stating that she was not prepared to have a baby. She begged the gynecologist for birth control, despite already being pregnant. She kept her pregnancy a secret from her friends and family. Before giving birth, she searched how not to have a baby and how to get rid of a baby on the internet. She attended her senior prom on May 5th, 2017. Well, within 48 hours, she gave birth to the child in the bathroom of her parents' house. She then allegedly buried the baby in her parents' backyard. The prosecution alleged that the baby was born alive, while the defense argued it was stillborn. And I don't know will this have any bearing on the testimony that you're going to hear or not, but it also goes on to tell you that that since the 6th grade, Skylar had suffered from an eating disorder. The morning after her birth, she texted her mother from the gym saying, quote, "I'm literally speechless with how happy I am. My belly is back, OMG," end quote. For 2 months, the baby remained buried. She did not tell anyone about the event. At another routine visit to the gynecologist, she admitted to having given birth and subsequently burying the baby in the backyard. The infant skeletal remains were dug up from the backyard on July 14th, 2017. And an initial autopsy determined that the baby's bones were partially charred and died of, quote, homicidal violence. However, forensic pathologist Dr. Elizabeth Murray, who had initially identified signs of charring on the bones, retracted that assertion before the trial. In a recorded interview by police with neither her parents nor her attorney present, Richardson was initially hesitant about the suggestion that she had burned the baby. But later, when a female officer was present, in response to being asked whether perhaps she attempted a cremation, she agreed. And when her parents were brought into the interrogation room, she stated, quote, "I tried to cremate the baby just a little," end quote. So now we are about to get underway with testimony. We're going to start with that of Trey Johnson.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May be seated.
You may.
Sir, would you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
My name is Trey Johnson, Johnsson.
Sir, how old are you?
21,
Where'd you go to high school?
West Carrollton High School.
And did you graduate from West Carrollton High School?
Yes, I did.
Are you familiar with an individual by the name of Brooke Richardson?
Yes, I am.
Sir, do you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please point her out, describe what she's wearing?
Right there in a green top.
Thank you.
And how do you know Brooke Richardson, sir?
I was in a relationship with her for about a month in 2016.
Okay. And was that during the month of August of 2016?
Yes, it was.
How did that get started, sir?
I had a cousin that went to high school with her who introduced us over social media, and we began talking that way.
Okay. And do you remember approximately the time in August when you first started hanging out and seeing each other in person?
The first week of August.
Okay. What types of things would you guys do together?
First time we hung out, we went to the movies, went to dinner, we'd go get ice cream, just that kind of thing.
Okay. Did you ever go to her home?
Yes, I did.
And would you hang out with her at the Richardson household?
Yes, I would.
Okay. And you stated this is sometime in that first week of August?
Near the end of the first week is when we started hanging out.
Okay. At some point, did the relationship turn sexual?
Yes, it did.
And did you have sex with Ms. Richardson?
Yes, I did.
How many times?
2.
During those times, sir, did you use protection when you had sex with her?
1 out of the 2 times.
Okay, so one time you did not use any protection?
Yes.
Do you know around when in August that was?
Middle August.
Okay. And this is all in 2016?
Yes, sir.
At some point, did your relationship come to an end?
Yes, it did.
Sir, who decided to end it?
She did.
And do you know approximately when it ended?
I began school at Wright State on the 26th, I believe, and it was before I went back to school.
So you began school on the 26th of August?
I think so, right around that day.
Okay, and it was before that time period that
Before
she ended
I
it?
started back my freshman year, yeah.
Okay. Did she tell you why she wanted to end the relationship?
She said that she had too many things going on with her senior year of high school and that she would not have time.
Okay. Did you wish to remain friends with her?
I mean, the most that you can be friends with somebody coming from that position.
Okay. And did you two continue being friends?
We did not.
What happened?
Nothing happened. We never spoke after that point.
Okay. Did you continue following each other on social media?
No. Once we had quit or ended, we were either I was blocked on everything or there was no form of communication or opportunity.
Okay. You didn't block her, is that fair to say?
No.
But you weren't able to access her stuff anymore?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever try to reach out to her, either through text message or calling her?
I may have one time to try and get belongings like sweatshirts, stuff like that back, but I never heard back. I'm not sure if it went through or...
After she ended it with you towards the that time in August that you were referencing, before August 26th, did she ever talk with you again?
No.
Did she ever advise you at any point in time that she was pregnant and that you were the father?
Not at all.
After the skeletal remains were recovered from Miss Richardson's home, did she ever call you then and tell you that you were in fact the father?
No, sir.
You haven't had any discussions with her about that whatsoever?
Not at all.
Sir, at some point during the investigation, after everything came to light, did detectives from the Warren County Sheriff's Office show up and request a buccal swab sample from you?
Yes, I did.
And did you provide that to the detectives, sir?
I did.
If I could have one moment, Your Honor. I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Mr. Rickers, cross.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Johnson? Yes, sir. You were in college when you started dating Skylar. She was in high school, right?
About to begin, yeah.
You're older than her.
Yes, sir.
And you do remember talking to the sheriff's office, correct?
I do.
And they said that they responded to Imperial Road address. That would be you?
Yes, sir.
And at first you denied there's any possibility that you were the father, correct?
From what I believed, yes. From not hearing anything, that's what I had assumed, yeah.
And you stated that you did everything but have sex.
I do not recall that.
Do you recall telling Detective Carter and Lieutenant Fain, who did you speak with?
I am not sure about that.
Male or female?
One male, one female.
Okay. Do you remember telling them that you did stuff for about a week in late July or first week of August, and then the next week she suddenly blocked him on all social media, and he has not spoken to her since?
No.
They got that wrong. Detective Carter did.
I do not recall that part.
Okay. No further questions, Judge.
Anything else for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You can step down. Next witness?
State recall Ashley Sparkman.
Ms. Sparkman has also requested that she not be photographed.
Okay, now, first off, we know that our first witness, Trey Johnson, was already involved in a relationship with Brooke Skylar Richardson. But as far as the one little intricacy, if I can say it right without getting my tongue tied, the one intricacy is that this witness, along with another, asked that they not be photographed. Ashley Sparkman. We'll also hear from. Oh my goodness! The next case is the next part of the testimony is coming from Ashley Sparkman, Dr. William Andrew, Allison Campbell, and Dr. Casey Boyce. Now, I'm only going to play parts of those testimonies simply because it's 2 hours in length. This whole set is 2 hours in length, and I know it's not. I don't want to take that long just for that bit of testimony.
Please State your full name for the record, spelling your last.
Ashley Nicole Sparkman, Sparkman.
And where are you employed, Ms. Sparkman?
Hilltop Obstetrics and Gynecology.
In what capacity?
4 years.
In what capacity, ma'am? What is your job with Hilltop OBGYN?
Medical assistant.
Okay. And you've been doing that job for 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Sparkman, as a medical assistant, what are your duties and responsibilities?
Checking patients in, getting weight and vitals, blood pressure, assisting doctors with exams.
Thank you. Ms. Sparkman, I'd like to direct your attention to April 26th of 2017 and ask if you were so employed and working in the office of Hilltop Obstetrics and Gynecology on that date.
Yes.
And were you involved in the medical treatment of an individual known as Brooke Skylar Richardson?
Yes.
Ms. Sparkman, do you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Noted, thank you.
Thank you. Prior to April 26th of 2017, did you know Brooke Richardson?
No.
How did she first come to your attention on that date?
She was on Dr. Andrews' schedule to be seen as a new patient.
Okay, and is he one of the doctors with Hilltop Obstetrics and Gynecology?
Yes.
When were you assigned to work with Dr. Andrew on that date?
Yes.
When you are assigned to work with a particular doctor, it's part of your responsibility to check the patients in?
Yes.
And is that what happened on that date?
Yes.
What was your understanding as to why Miss Richardson was coming to Hilltop Obstetrics on that date?
She was scheduled as a new patient for birth control.
Okay. And where in the office did you first meet with her?
The waiting room?
And when you went to, did you go to get her out of the waiting room?
Yes.
Was she alone or was she with somebody else?
I don't remember.
Okay. When you brought her back to the examination room, was she alone or was she with someone else?
She was alone.
And once you have her back in the examination room, what is your protocol?
To get the patient all checked in, to get her weight, blood pressure, to confirm what she's there for.
And did you do those things with Miss Richardson?
Yes.
Were you able to obtain her weight on that date?
Yes.
And do you recall what it was?
149 pounds.
And were you able to obtain her blood pressure on that date?
Yes.
Do you recall what that was?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Ms. Sparkman, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1 for purposes of identification. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And can you tell us what it is?
Her blood pressure.
Is that document a collection of Miss Richardson's records from Hilltop Obstetrics?
Yes.
What's the designation, the exhibit?
State's Exhibit number 1. Within that collection of documentations, is there an entry for the date that you checked her into Hilltop Obstetrics on April 26th of 2017?
Yes.
And did you document in that record both her weight and her blood pressure on that date?
Yes.
And I believe you already said that her weight was 149 pounds?
Correct.
And what was her blood pressure?
112/80.
From the examination, or the part of the examination that you did when you were checking her in, were there any noted health concerns?
She was nervous. She may have had goosebumps on her arms.
She was nervous and she had goosebumps on her arms. Did she relate to you when you were checking her in any concerns about her own physical health?
No.
And did you note any concerns about her physical health based on your check-in procedures?
No.
Okay. But you noticed that she was nervous and that she had goosebumps on her arms?
Yes.
Can you describe that a little bit more for me?
She appeared to be nervous, more so than the typical patient that we'd check in.
Would it be fair to say at your office you see not a lot of, but a good number of teenage parents?
Yes.
Some first-time teenage parents?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to check them in before?
Yes.
Did you feel that her reaction was different than your average teenager?
Yes.
And how so? How did she seem different to you, Ms. Sparkman?
Just because she seemed so nervous.
Okay. Did you try to gather, you said that you were able to get her weight and her blood pressure. She did not relay any physical health issues to you. Did you ask her about her menstrual cycle at all?
Yes.
Was she able to give you any information about her menstrual cycle?
Yes.
What was she able to tell you?
She told me that she had had a period a couple weeks before her visit.
Okay.
That her periods were normal.
Did she indicate to you that she would go more than a year without a period?
No.
Did she give you any indication that she had any concerns about her menstrual cycle?
No.
Based on the information that you obtained from her and your observations about her demeanor, which I think you said were a little bit more than the typical first-time teenage patient, what, if anything, did you do with that information?
I told Dr. Andrew after I was finished checking her in that she seemed very nervous.
Do you recall specifically what you told him?
No.
Okay. But you recall it having to do with her state, her presentation
Yes.
of being nervous? What happened next after you alerted him?
He went in to see her, to talk with her.
Did you go back in with him or did he go alone?
He went by himself.
And do you recall approximately how long he was in there?
10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. When Dr. Andrew came out, did he give you any additional orders?
We were going to do a urine pregnancy test.
And did you in fact obtain the urine pregnancy test from Miss Richardson?
Yes.
How did you do so?
She gave us a urine sample and I ran a test and it showed positive.
Okay. Once you got the test result, and I believe you just indicated it was positive, what did you do with that information?
I told Dr. Andrew.
You did not tell Miss Richardson?
No.
Okay, so that information goes directly to Dr. Andrew?
Yes.
What happened next, if you know?
After I told him that it was positive, he went back in to talk with her, and then he took her to the ultrasound room.
And do you know what his reason was for taking her to the ultrasound room?
Because her pregnancy test was positive.
Okay, did he have any discussions with you about why he wanted to take her in there?
No.
Okay. Did you go in at the time that the ultrasound was being performed?
No.
After the ultrasound was performed, did you have any other conversations with Dr. Andrew?
After he was finished with the ultrasound,
Yes.
he told me that she may be 32 weeks pregnant.
Okay.
From his abdominal scan.
From the abdominal scan? After the ultrasound was performed, did you have any further contact with Miss Richardson?
I went back into the room to check on her to make sure she was okay. She was crying, so I offered her a cup of water. She said no.
She said no. Did she make any statements to you, or did you inquire about why she was crying?
No.
After offering her the water, did you have any further contact with her on that date?
No.
Ms. Sparkman, I'd like to direct your attention to July 12th of 2017 and ask if on that date you again had an opportunity to be involved in the medical treatment of Ms. Richardson.
Yes.
And were you assigned to work with a different doctor on that date?
Yes.
And who was that?
Dr. Boyce.
How did it first come to your attention that Ms. Richardson was back on the appointment schedule?
I reviewed my schedule the morning of and saw her name on the schedule for a follow-up.
And did it indicate what it was a follow-up for?
Birth control.
Did that surprise you in any way?
Yes.
And why is that?
When she was seen originally with Dr. Andrew, he prescribed birth control before we did the pregnancy test. And then he discontinued it when we were in the office that day. So when I saw her on the schedule with Dr. Boyce 2 or 3 months later, I didn't understand why she was following up on birth control.
I'm going to go ahead and call this weird. I know I just read this and I just heard the testimony from Ashley Sparkman, but it's still weird to me. She is asking for birth control despite already being pregnant. Why would she do that? Somebody please try to make that part make sense.
Were you involved with trying to make any contact with her to come back into the office after the April 26th appointment?
No.
Were you aware that she had not returned to the office after the April 26th appointment?
Yes.
Did you alert anyone to the fact that she was back on the appointment schedule?
Dr. Boyce.
And what happened at that time?
After she got to the office.
When you alerted Dr. Boyce, what information did you share with her?
I told her that she had a positive test 2 or 3 months prior to that she had not returned, and that she was back on the schedule for a follow-up on birth control.
And was that conversation limited to you and Dr. Boyce, or was anyone else involved?
Just Dr. Boyce and I.
Did you follow the same procedure for checking her in as you did in the last appointment?
Yes.
And when you went to get her from the waiting room, was there anyone else present with her that day?
I don't remember.
When you brought her back to the examination room, was there anyone present with her?
No.
Did you start obtaining her vitals again?
Yes.
And do you recall on July 12th of 2017 what her weight was?
130 pounds.
And what her blood pressure was?
118/62.
And that would be approximately a 19-pound change in her weight at that time?
Yes.
On that date, did she appear pregnant to you?
No.
How would you describe her demeanor on the July 12th appointment?
I don't remember.
Do you recall if she seemed nervous again?
Not as nervous as the original appointment.
Okay. Did you attempt to engage her in any conversation while you were checking her in?
No.
Did you ask her why she was there or confirm that it was for birth control?
Yes, I asked her what she was following up on, and she said birth control.
At that time, did you question her about the fact that she was no longer pregnant?
No.
Did she volunteer any information to you about not being pregnant any longer?
No.
After checking her in, what did you do next?
I told Dr. Boyce that she was following up on birth control.
Did you alert her to the fact that she was no longer pregnant?
No.
Do you recall making any statements to her about her no longer having a belly or anything like that?
I don't remember.
When Dr. Boyce went into the examination room, did she go with you or did she go in by herself?
By herself.
And were you able to hear anything while she was in the examination room?
As I was checking in the patient in the next room, I heard sobbing.
Did you have any further contact with the defendant on that date?
No.
Did you have any further discussions with Dr. Boyce regarding Miss Richardson's state of being pregnant and then no longer pregnant?
Yes.
And what was that conversation?
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, normally I don't allow folks to testify about what other people talk about, but I'm going to allow this for a very limited purpose, and that limited purpose is explaining why these individuals were doing what they are doing. So you can consider it for that purpose and for no other. Go ahead, Ms. Kraft.
Can you please tell us what the nature of that conversation was?
Dr. Boyce, Dr. Andrew, and 2 other employees were in an exam room, and Dr. Boyce told us that she buried the baby.
That she buried the baby?
Yes.
Did you have any other contact with the defendant after that July 12th examination?
No.
To your knowledge, has she ever come back to the office for any further care?
No.
Your Honor, may I have a moment?
Okay.
Nothing further.
Mr. Rickers, you may inquire. You may.
I want to go back over that piece of testimony where the medical personnel members said that Richardson at one point had a visit. She was pregnant. Then she comes back for a follow-up visit, and she's not pregnant. Now, this would normally be this kind of case would be normally an open and shut case. But as you all know, not all open and shut cases are open and shut.
I have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further for this witness? All right, thank you, ma'am. You can step down.
After I told Dr. Andrew that the is the one who asked her for the urine sample, showed her where the restroom was, and then he went to the back to the break room to get a cup of water, and as he was back there, I ran the test.
Okay, and Skylar voluntarily gave the urine sample.
Yes.
And Skylar thought she was having periods. She said she was bleeding, right?
That's what she said.
And at that appointment on April 26th, a script for birth control was given, correct?
Yes.
And it went to the pharmacy.
Yes.
And later, your office tried to cancel the script, right?
After I told Dr. Andrew that the pregnancy test was positive, he discontinued.
Okay. When you, on July 12th, when Skylar came back, after you left her in the room with Dr. Boyce, you could hear Skylar sobbing through the walls of the exam room?
After Dr. Boyce was in there, yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further for this witness? All right, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. You can step down. Next witness?
Call Dr. Andrew. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Maybe see.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Doctor, would you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
William Andrew, A-N-D-R-E-W.
Sir, what's your business address?
Hilltop Obstetrics and Gynecology, 200 Medical Center Drive, Middletown, Ohio, 45005.
What is your occupation there, sir?
I'm an obstetrician gynecologist.
How long have you been employed in that capacity?
23 years.
And could you talk to the jury just a little bit about your education and training that qualifies you for that position?
I have a BA from Williams College. I have an MD from the University of Cincinnati, and I did a residency, an internship in family medicine for a year at the University of Cincinnati, and then I had 4 years of residency and graduated from a residency program at Bethesda Hospital in Cincinnati. The residency program was in obstetrics and gynecology.
Did you hold any licenses or licensures?
I'm licensed to practice medicine in the state of Ohio.
Doctor, I want to direct your attention to April 26, 2017. Did you have occasion to provide medical treatment to Brooke Skylar Richardson on that date?
I did.
Do you see Ms. Richardson in the courtroom, doctor?
We will stipulate her identity throughout the trial, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Could you, let me ask you this question. Did you know Ms. Richardson prior to that date?
I delivered her 18 years prior.
Okay. So you have been the family's OBGYN for at least 18 years then?
I did provide care for her mother, and I believe that I delivered her brother as well.
Okay. On that date, April 26, 2017, do you recall what was her listed reason for the appointment? Why was she making an appointment that day?
My medical assistant, Ashley, said that she was there to start birth control.
Okay. And if you could explain, how did Ms. Richardson come to your attention on that day there at the office?
She was placed in a room as other patients would have been, and her chief complaint and vital signs, I think, were taken by the medical assistant working with me, Ashley. And then Ashley came out and told me what she was there for, and then I looked at the medical record as Ashley had recorded it.
Did Ashley provide you with any other information, sir?
She said that the patient looked nervous and that she seemed to be breathing hard.
After speaking with Ashley, did you go into the exam room and make contact with the defendant?
I did.
Could you explain to the jurors exactly what happened when you went in?
I sat down and asked Skylar, the patient, how I could help her.
What did she indicate to you, sir?
She said that she wanted to start birth control pill.
Okay. Was there further discussion?
We had a general discussion about the nature of birth control, why it was a good thing to use it for reasons other than birth control. We had a discussion about whether or not she was prepared to have a gynecologic examination. I took some general history about her and some sexual history as well.
Okay. Did you also talk to her about her menstrual cycle?
Ashley had recorded a date for a last menstrual period, and I asked her about a last menstrual period, and I was not confused, but the two things didn't entirely match up. I think she told me what I had recorded in the medical record was that she had had a menstrual period the month prior, and so that's what I recorded, and what Ashley had recorded was earlier that month.
Okay. So you believe she may have told you the month prior to her visit, and she may have told Ashley earlier that month that she had a menstrual cycle?
Correct.
Okay. Was there any concerns when she was talking to you about her menstrual cycle?
Well, the patient had declined to have a gynecologic examination that day. And so based on that and and the idea that we were going to be starting birth control pills, and the idea that there was some uncertainty about the last menstrual period, I deemed it necessary to get a pregnancy test.
Okay. And I'm sorry, could you try to keep your voice up just
I
a little bit?
apologize.
That's okay. You said that she declined a gynecological exam?
Correct.
What did she tell you why?
The way I usually couch that is, are you prepared to undergo a gynecologic examination today? And just kind of get a feel for how someone responds to that. When particularly a young woman, a teenager, presents and they may or have different expectations of what's going to go on in the exam that day, they may or may not know that a gynecologic examination is recommended or preferred or required as part of their complaint. And so springing a gynecologic examination on a teenager is fraught with some difficulty. It could damage the patient-doctor relationship if I were to sort of compel someone to do that. And so it would not be my practice to force that upon any young woman.
So based on that declination of the gynecological exam and the different statements she made about her menstrual cycle, what did you do?
We asked her to provide us with a urine specimen so that we could do a pregnancy test.
Did you tell her that that was the reason that you were asking for the urine specimen?
I recall that she went down the hallway to get a urine, to give us a urine specimen. I don't recall whether I specifically said that we needed a urine pregnancy test to her, or that certainly, I don't recall that.
Okay.
The scenario was there.
Okay. And did she in fact provide a urine sample?
Yes.
And what were the results of that, sir?
It was positive.
Meaning that she was pregnant at the time?
Correct.
What did you do with that information, if anything?
Well, I returned to the room where the patient had returned and explained that there was a positive pregnancy test, and then proceeded with a sort of a general physical examination rather than the more in-depth gynecologic examination. And I measured her belly, what's called a fundal height, so measured from the pubic symphysis to the top of the fundus, or at least I believe that I did, because I recorded a very specific number for that in the medical record of 32 centimeters.
Well, and so let's take those a couple of things at a time. You first went back and informed her that she was pregnant?
Correct.
What was her reaction upon you telling her that she was pregnant?
She broke into tears. She was surprised.
Okay. Was she crying?
She did.
What statements was she making, if any?
She said that she could not she was not prepared to deliver a baby. She could not have a baby.
Okay. How many times do you think she said that she couldn't have a baby?
I remember it at least once.
Okay. And did she say anything about whether she could tell anyone about being pregnant?
She did say that, that's sort of was a conversation that occurred a little bit later.
Okay, then we'll wait to get there.
Yes.
So you tell her she's pregnant, she bursts into tears and says that she can't have the baby. Is that accurate?
An exclamation, I can't have a baby. Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
An exclamation, I can't have a baby.
Okay.
Doctor, if you lean into the red light microphone a little bit, that will amplify. I know it's a little confusing, but that's the one that will amplify.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're at the point where Brooke Skylar Richardson finds out, yes, she is pregnant, and she makes a declaration, a tearful declaration, may I add, that she cannot have. She's not prepared. She's not ready to have this baby. So now she's at the point of what am I gonna do now? Of course, the medical personnel is gonna copy, is not gonna copy, but they're going to agree to all statements made from the hospital. And of course, being that this is an edition of BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded, I've got Baby Kisses in the chat. How you doing, Baby Kisses? And she's been chiming all throughout the testimony. And again, this is one of those. This is a very weird case even for me. And I'm still trying to sort out all of the details. Let's see. Now, keeping in mind the prosecution had already alleged that Richardson had burned her newborn child's body before burying it in the backyard of her home. The defense, on the other hand, will argue that Richardson was subjected to an overzealous interrogation because of the baby burning theory, which was at this point unsupported. Now, as I'm listening to the testimony, and I know it's excuse me. I know it's rather early in the in the trial, but given the notes that I already have, if she actually went ahead and gave birth, tried to hide what happened with her by first attempting to cremate the baby before burying it, let's just say that I can see where the abuse of a corpse and child endangerment charges come from. And yes, baby kisses, this is indeed really sad.
And then I believe you indicated that after that, you told her that she was pregnant. She's in tears, and I'm sorry, you said she was crying or she wasn't crying?
She cried at the time.
Okay, and then you performed an abdominal examination?
Correct.
Explain to the jury what that means.
So I examined her abdomen, would have had her lay down on the examination table and feel the abdomen, palpating the abdomen, and then I measured the fundal height.
And explain to the jury, what does it mean when you say you measured the fundal height?
So if the uterus is big enough, it is above the pelvic brim. That means you can feel the growing uterus in the abdomen. And I measured from the pubic symphysis to what I taught was the top of the uterus, and then recorded that number.
Okay. And do you recall specifically for this appointment how you conducted that measurement?
I recorded a very specific number, so I think that I measured as I would have measured other fundal heights with a measuring tape.
And I understand that you're saying that you recorded a specific measurement, but do you specifically recall using the tape?
I have no independent memory of that. I will say that it's such a common thing that I do that maybe I wouldn't have an independent memory of it.
And Doctor, do you remember being interviewed by Detective Fain and Detective Carter with the Warren County Sheriff's Office?
I do.
And that was back July 24th of 2017, is that correct?
Correct.
And that obviously was much closer in time to this incident than here now, where we're in September of 2019, is that correct?
Yes.
And you remember speaking to them, is that right?
I do.
And you provided them with information about the visit, is that correct?
Yeah, I did.
If you were specifically asked that question about how you took the measurement during that recorded interview, which we have, would that refresh your memory about whether you used a tape measure or whether you used your hand?
I reviewed that. I know what I said at that time, but...
Okay, what did you say at that time?
I think that I didn't know how I had measured that at the time, but that I was uncertain that maybe I had measured with just my hands.
Okay, so back in 2017, soon after this appointment, you had indicated that you thought you used your hands, not the tape measure.
That's probable, yes.
Okay.
At that time, I didn't look. I had not reviewed the medical record, which indicated that I had recorded a very specific number.
I understand that, but that was obviously much closer in time to the actual visit that you had with her just a couple of months later, is that right?
It was.
Okay. And what did the fundal height measurement reveal at that time?
I recorded it in the medical record as 32 centimeters.
And what does that mean when you say it was 32 centimeters?
So roughly speaking, the fundal height in centimeters is equal to the gestational age in weeks.
And is there, with respect to fundal height, when you're doing that type of measurement, is there a plus or minus a couple of weeks one way or the other?
So there would be concern about the growth of the fetus if the fundal height was more than 4 centimeters above what you would expect based on a known gestational age, or more than 2 centimeters below.
Okay. But I'm sorry, I meant, is there an error rate? When you say 32 weeks, could it actually be a couple weeks after 32 weeks when you do that? Or is it, when you do 32 centimeters, is it precisely that?
Well, I think that my measurement of the fundal height is relative, is that I can reasonably expect that my measurement of fundal heights is good. That there are a variety of different factors that would change that measure of the fundal height. For example, the body habitus of the patient might change it. If someone is very large, they would have more abdominal fat, which would add to the fundal height potentially. So if you're doing a fundal height on someone who's very large, you might get a fundal height that's a little bit more than what you would expect based on the number of gestation, the number of weeks that the patient is.
And so and maybe I'm not asking the question very well, can it be plus or minus 3 or 4 weeks in terms of a fundal height measurement?
So yes, the fundal height, well, maybe it makes more sense to the fundal height, if you've got an established gestational age, right, based on someone getting prenatal care from the very beginning of the pregnancy. If you knew that someone was supposed to be 32 weeks gestation and you got a fundal height that measured 32 weeks gestation, that would be reassuring. If it was 34, 35 weeks gestation, you'd be suspicious that that baby was on the large side. If it was 28 weeks gested, 28 weeks or 28 centimeters, then you would be concerned that maybe that baby's not growing adequately. In the situation that I was faced with, 32 centimeters from someone who hasn't, to my knowledge, has kind of an unknown gestational age, didn't mean anything was right or wrong. It just meant that the patient was probably about 32 centimeters. Was probably about, based on a measurement of 32 centimeters, was probably about 32 weeks gestation. Could that patient be more or less than that? Yes.
And they could be more or less 3 to 4 weeks. Is that what you've indicated before?
Yes.
Okay. Having obtained this additional information about the fundal height, what did you do next, doctor?
So I escorted Skylar to the ultrasound room, which is sort of around the corner, where we did a very brief ultrasound.
Why did you do the ultrasound, sir?
To confirm that she was, in fact, pregnant with an intrauterine pregnancy, and that it was not some other pathology. So it's reasonably possible that someone could have a very large ovarian cyst, which could make it feel like someone was 32 weeks pregnant, but not actually be 32 weeks pregnant.
Did you also think that it would do good for Skylar to see the ultrasound?
In a situation where someone is having difficulty accepting the idea of a pregnancy, it could be helpful for the patient to see that there is in fact a fetus with a heartbeat.
And fair to say in this case you thought it would be helpful for her to see that fetus with a heartbeat, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you said this was just a very brief ultrasound, is that right?
That's correct.
It's not for the purpose of taking measurements or anything like that where you're trying to ascertain specific measurements of any bone lengths. You were just doing this to make sure that there actually was a fetus in there and to show Skylar that. Is that fair?
Well, I did at least one measurement.
Okay.
Because that's what I've recorded in the medical record.
Okay, and what did that measurement indicate?
Was consistent with what I wrote in the medical record was subjectively 32 weeks gestation.
Okay. And again, is that an exact measurement?
It was not a, I did not perform multiple measurements of different body parts, and so it could not be considered definitive.
That's something that you would typically do at an ultrasound if you were trying to make an estimate about how far along in gestation. You wouldn't just take one measurement, you would take multiple measurements so that you could make a decision. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay, and in this case, you just took the one because, again, it wasn't really your purpose to do the full measurement and figure out how far along the baby was.
Well, I certainly wanted to confirm that I was within the ballpark, but it was my intent to get a more formal ultrasound soon.
Okay. And the purpose of that more formal ultrasound would be what, doctor?
A more formal ultrasound would assess all the anatomy of the fetus, or at least, I should say, all the anatomy. Certain anatomic features, confirming that they look normal. It would be an assessment at that gestational age, an assessment of the fluid around the fetus, an assessment of the position of the placenta, and the position of the fetus itself.
Okay. And you would have done more measurements in that more formal ultrasound?
That's true.
Okay. With respect to the ultrasound that you did perform, were you able to obtain a heart rate?
Yes.
And what was the baby's heart rate?
I believe I recorded it in the medical record as 140.
40? And tell the jurors what that means. I don't know that everyone understands. Is 140 good? Is it bad? Is it?
It's what I would have expected.
For a normal, healthy baby, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I will add that heart rate is one of the last things that would change in the event that something was wrong.
Okay. Did you see anything in that ultrasound that you performed, and I know it was brief, that caused you any concern about the health of the fetus?
I did not. I will add to that one, it was not considered a formal and extensive ultrasound, and that not knowing what the gestational age was, it would have been difficult to make an assessment of whether or not, for example, something like fetal growth was normal. If you don't have another date on which to base the pregnancy, at 32 weeks, you can't say, well, is that normal, or is that excessive, or is that too little?
Okay. And so you wanted her to come back in to do that more formal ultrasound where you would look at things in more detail?
Yes.
But based on what you saw, no concerns about amniotic fluid levels?
I did not do anything to assess the amniotic fluid levels. But
okay. Were you able to make a determination about the position of the baby?
I did record in the medical record that the fetus was presenting head first.
Okay. In cephalic presentation?
Correct.
Okay. Did you take a measurement of the femur when you did the ultrasound?
I believe that was the one measurement that I performed.
Okay. Are you sure about that?
I did not record that in the medical record, so I just believe that. Yes, I think so.
Okay. But it's not recorded?
I did not record what measurement I took.
Okay. And you're not claiming, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not claiming that the measurements that you took with your hand or with that one measurement of the ultrasound are definitive. Is that fair to say?
That's true.
Okay. When you showed Ms. Richardson the ultrasound, and you showed her that there was a baby inside of her, and that there was a heart rate, fetal heartbeat, what was her reaction?
I believe she was still upset.
Okay, what was she saying?
I don't know that she said anything at that time.
Okay. When you showed her, and maybe this is the wrong time, but when you showed her the ultrasound, did you tell her that she would need to tell someone?
Yes.
And what was her response?
No, I don't believe there was a response.
Okay. Do you recall, did she make a statement about going to college?
I think that occurred after I told her that she was pregnant, and she said, "I can't have a baby. I'm going to college."
Okay.
In September.
As you dealt with her, did she become, in your opinion, more adamant that she couldn't tell anyone about what had happened?
I don't know if she became more adamant, or I just assumed that that she had said that originally, and that I needed to counsel her about the importance of telling someone.
Okay. And again, when you tried to counsel her about the importance of that, what was her reaction?
At this point in the ultrasound room, I'm not sure that she indicated a reaction one way or the other.
Was she still crying?
I think that she was still very upset, but I'm not sure that that was audible or that was my sense from her body language.
Okay. After you're with her in the ultrasound room, what happens next?
So I sit down with her in the ultrasound room and start to explain that I understand that she doesn't think she's that she.
Do we know what's beeping?
Wait 1 second, doctor. We'll see if we can.
Do we know what's beeping?
I think my watch, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Go ahead.
If you could start again. I'm sorry. In the ultrasound room, I believe.
So I sat down with her in the ultrasound room after the ultrasound. She's now sitting on the bed that we did the ultrasound on, and I'm sitting in a chair, and I felt obligated to explain that she was in fact going to have a baby in the next, I think I recorded, or I'd said the next 10 weeks or so, which would have made sense. 32 weeks, we don't let anybody go more than 42 weeks gestation. I explained that she didn't, that while she was going to have a baby, she didn't necessarily have to raise a baby.
Why did you tell her that, doctor?
Well, I think that it's important that people understand, particularly a teenager might think very linearly and not know that there are options.
Okay. And so you told her that she wouldn't have to necessarily raise the baby?
That's correct.
And when you say she wouldn't have to raise the baby, I think you said it, but what did you mean?
Well, that people would line up to raise that baby.
Okay. What was her reaction when you told her that there were other options, that she could give the child up for adoption?
I didn't specifically mention adoption, but I did say that I thought people would line up to raise the baby.
Is that what you meant? I understand you didn't say that. Is that what you meant, though, would be to give it up for adoption?
Well, that's not been my experience. So I don't know that I would have said that. My experience is that most of teenagers in a situation like this, oftentimes their mother ends up raising the baby, they have a relative who raises the baby. So adoption, as we kind of may think of it in standard fashion, isn't what ends up happening. But
and I'm sorry, what was her, when you talked to her about people would line up to raise this baby, what was her reaction to that?
I'm not sure that there was any audible reaction or.
Do you recall, did she agree with you? Did she say that's an option? Did she say, I can't do that? Do you remember?
I don't recall that there was any audible response. It's likely that at that point.
It's what? I'm sorry?
It's likely that at that point she was not hearing or was hearing but not internalizing what I was saying.
Why do you say that?
that would have been not an atypical response of a teenager, a scared teenager confronted with news that they didn't expect.
Okay. What other conversations did you have with her there in the ultrasound room?
We talked about depression. Well, no, I can say we didn't talk about it. I warned her that if she felt like hurting herself or hurting the baby in any way, that she should contact me.
Why did you tell her that?
Well, she'd received some surprise news, and in general, I counsel every woman at some point in the pregnancy about the importance of understanding that I am a resource for if they have postpartum depression, antepartum depression, anxiety or issues, I'm an appropriate person to bring those issues to.
That's not something you would typically do at a first visit, though, is it?
It's true that I wouldn't do that at a first visit in a typical situation. This was not a typical situation.
Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
And part of that was based on her reaction and the statement she was telling you. Is that fair?
Well, that's true. It's also true that it was a surprise to her that she was pregnant and that she was this far along. Then it was a surprise to me that she was certainly a surprise to me that she was that far along.
And I know you keep using the term that she was surprised. You don't know if there's other information that would suggest that she thought she might have been pregnant when she scheduled that appointment. You don't have any of that information. Is that fair to say?
I do not, but that would not surprise me either. The vast majority of people who have come to me, and as you can imagine, in 23 years, I've seen situations like this several times, and in the vast majority of the situations, people come with a chief complaint that is somewhat different than I suspect I might be pregnant.
Okay. Did you give her, well, let me ask you this. When you were having that discussion with her about people lining up and they would raise this baby, did she ever ask you about abortion or a way to terminate the baby?
She did not.
So at no point when you're having those discussions with her, does she ever ask you about the option of abortion?
She does not.
Okay. Does she ever ask you for any other options?
I don't recall her verbalizing any response to the several different subjects to the topics that I brought up.
Okay. Did you talk to her? Was there any discussion? Because obviously you knew that she was there for birth control pills. Is that right?
Correct.
And is it my understanding, I believe Ms. Sparkman testified that you had worked ahead and prepared a prescription for birth control?
Correct.
When you're having any discussion with her after she knows she's pregnant, does that discussion about birth control pills ever come up?
Yes.
And what was the conversation, doctor?
That we were beyond the point of using birth control pills, that she was obviously pregnant.
Okay. And so you said that to her and she heard you?
She heard me. Did she internalize that? Did she internalize any of the things that I was saying at that point? I don't know.
Okay. But it certainly wasn't your intent for her to get a birth control prescription.
That's true.
Okay. Let's clear one thing up just so everyone understands. The fact that there may be evidence to suggest that she was taking birth control pills from the time that she left that appointment until the time that she had the baby, would that affect the baby at all if she was taking birth control pills during that time period?
I think that's unlikely.
Okay. That's not something you would expect to have a negative impact on the baby, the fact that she was taking those pills?
Well, I could come up with a theory or a mechanism by which such a thing could have happened. It would not typically be.
Okay. Any other discussions with her that you recall that happened there in the ultrasound room between you and her?
I don't think so.
Did you give her any medical advice or talk to her about making additional appointments.
Yes.
Talk to the jury about that. What happened?
I explained that we wanted to see her back. We needed to start prenatal care, and that I wanted to see her back within the next week.
Okay. And in fact, you told her you wanted an ultrasound, a full ultrasound that next day. Is that right?
That's likely. Yeah, I think I did.
And what was the urgency, if any, of getting her in within a week? Was there something going on that was actually important to get her in within a week?
Well, in advanced stages of pregnancy, obviously the dating of an ultrasound gets worse as the pregnancy gets farther along. So the sooner the ultrasound is, a formal ultrasound is done, the sooner we'll have good dating criteria. That was one issue. The ultrasound itself, would have been important just to, again, date pregnancy and make sure that the health of the pregnancy. Starting prenatal care, there was an additional issue there with insurance, is that if I had the first new obstetrical visit before a week or a week and a half or something like that, there was I think her insurance company was United Healthcare. United Healthcare and the hospital that we primarily delivered at, Atrium Medical Center, which is the closest to her home, were not in network as of a week and a half from then. So anyone that we had started prenatal care on by the end of the month, I think, was eligible to deliver at Atrium Medical Center, the closest hospital to her home. And if not, then it became more nebulous about where we would deliver her. So it made some sense for convenience sake for both her and for our practice that perinatal care start as soon as possible. But regardless of all that, I would have wanted to have started prenatal care as soon as possible anyway.
But it wasn't because of anything that you saw during that ultrasound that led you to believe that the baby was in distress. Is that fair?
That's true.
Okay. Because is it fair to say, doctor, had you seen something that you believed that baby was in trouble or that baby was in distress, you would have taken immediate actions that day?
Yes.
Do you know, after you told her that you wanted her to set up that ultrasound right away and get started with prenatal care, do you know whether she ever scheduled her follow-up appointment?
I know that she did not.
And as a result of her not scheduling that, was there anything that you requested your staff to do?
Yes. So I spoke to the RN, Allison Campbell, who runs sort of the back, the clinical operations, or at the time was running the clinical operations of our practice, and asked that she follow up with her to make sure that those appointments got scheduled.
And are you aware whether Allison made those efforts to follow up with her?
Yes.
And did she make those efforts?
I believe that she did.
Was she successful?
I believe that she was not.
Okay. And as a result of that, as a result of Allison being unable to get her to come back in, did you yourself take any efforts to get Brooke back in?
I also called her phone number.
What was the reason that you called her phone number?
To make sure that we had done everything we could to get her the appointment that she needed for prenatal care.
Did it concern you that she wasn't scheduling her follow-up appointments?
It would have concerned me if anyone had, whether they'd had prenatal care or not, hadn't scheduled a follow-up appointment.
Did you personally ever see her again for medical treatment?
I did not.
I want to direct your attention to July 12th, 2017. Was it brought to your attention that the defendant had an appointment scheduled at your office on that day?
Yes.
And how was that brought to your attention, sir?
Dr. Boyce came to me and said that Skylar had had an appointment with her that day.
Okay. And upon hearing that news, what was your reaction?
Well, surprised that she hadn't been in to see us for several weeks, and I think by that time she would have been expected to deliver. And we said, well, we'll find out what became of that pregnancy.
And did you talk to Dr. Boyce about the appointment that you had with her back on April 26th?
Yes.
Okay. And so Dr. Boyce knew that she was pregnant going into that appointment?
Yes.
Okay. Were you involved in that at all when Dr. Boyce went in and talked to the defendant?
I was not.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with Dr. Boyce after the fact about the appointment?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, based on those discussions with Dr. Boyce, was the decision ultimately made to call law enforcement?
Yes.
If I can have one moment, Your Honor. I know you said you reviewed that audio and video of your interview with the detectives. Is that correct?
Audio. Was there a video component?
I'm sorry?
Was there a video component? I did not review a video component.
I'm sorry. No, it was just audio. You're right. Okay. You did review that.
I read a transcript of it, yes.
Okay. And so I want to ask you again, how many times, to the best of your recollection, do you think that she indicated to you that she couldn't have a baby?
Objection, ask and answer, Your Honor.
Overruled.
At least once.
Was it more than once?
I don't recall.
Okay. And with respect to not being able to tell anyone that she was pregnant, how many times do you think she made that statement that she couldn't tell anyone?
At least once.
And could it have been more than once?
It could have been.
Could it have been 5 times?
I don't think so. Okay. That would have made an impression on me.
Do you recall, in addition to saying that she couldn't tell anyone, was she specifically concerned about whether she could tell her mother?
Did she? Well, sitting here today, I can't recall whether or not she specifically said, I cannot tell my mother, or I cannot tell anyone.
One second, Your Honor.
You may.
Good morning, Dr. Andrew.
Good morning.
The prosecutor made a lot of statements about what was typical and atypical. Having a teenage mother learn for the first time that she was pregnant, was Skylar's reaction typical?
It would be difficult for me to say that there's a typical reaction. It's not outside the realm of what I would imagine is expected.
And her reaction was one of surprise.
Definitely.
And it's not uncommon for a teenage girl to react in disbelief when she's first told certainly that she's pregnant.
Anyone who's wouldn't be limited to just teenage girls, but yes.
Okay. The advice that the prosecutor talked about that you gave Skylar about depression, or I think in opening you mentioned suicide, that's the advice you give any woman in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Is that correct?
It is true.
And so because it was the atypical thing that you gave it in the first visit was because it is atypical to see someone who is pregnant in the 3rd trimester for the first time.
Yes, that's true.
If you had any belief that Skylar was going to harm herself or her fetus, you would have called the authorities. Is that correct?
That's true.
I wanted to stop to first off apologize because I jumped the gun by saying that I didn't want to go all the way through testimony like this because all of this from medical personnel would be 2 hours long, but at the same time, just this doc's testimony alone is worth the time. That's the first thing I want to put. So I apologize for jumping that gun. Second thing, I want to bring up a comment that Baby Kisses left, and she said this topic is very controversial with religious people, whether or not to allow your child as a teen to be on birth control. But I think parents should know in case of adverse reactions, which is a great idea. Yeah, so this is the kind of thing we ought to pay attention to and be on the lookout for. If we don't, there's gonna be problems in the long run. Now back to testimony.
And you did not.
I did not.
How common is it for a teenager the first time they go to the OBGYN? You'd never seen Skylar before, right?
That's, well, I delivered her.
Sorry.
So technically speaking, I had seen her before, but I had never seen her as a gynecologic patient.
And is it typical for a first-time OBGYN appointment for someone to be nervous about a pelvic exam?
Yes, that's true.
Is it typical for teenagers to sometimes refuse pelvic exams for you as a doctor in your experience?
Yes. So a young woman who's never had a pelvic examination may come to the doctor expecting to have a pelvic examination, have been told by whoever, if they're underage, whoever their guardian is or their parent, they may have fear about how uncomfortable the exam is, how invasive the exam is. They may not expect to have an exam at all. So it's fair to say that we oftentimes have people who've come in for their very first examination or have come in for some other reason, and it's deemed that the best way to evaluate that problem is to do a pelvic examination, and they may not want to have a pelvic examination. So we fairly commonly have teenagers who either may get into a disagreement with the person who's there with them, who's insisting that they wish to have an exam. The parent or the mother or the guardian may wish them to have the examination done, and the patient may not want to have an exam. And sometimes we get into some long-winded debates, arguments over whether or not an examination is going to be done.
And that would mean you would leave the room for that?
Well, at first I might stick around for a little while to emphasize why the exam is important, to explain the examination, show them how the examination is going to be performed, explain, but in the end, if there's just a debate between a young woman and her guardian or her mother or whoever brought her to the office, I wouldn't stick around for that.
Charting medical charts are important in your practice, is that correct?
That's true.
And when you had spoken with the police, you had not reviewed your medical charts in this case, is that correct?
That's true.
But you've later gone back and you have reviewed them, correct?
That's true.
And you're aware that in your charts that on April 26th of 2017, you took 2 measurements indicating that Skylar was 32 weeks pregnant. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one was in your chart, it's marked US transabdominal. What is that?
Ultrasound transabdominal means an ultrasound done of the abdomen from outside the abdomen.
And that exam said Subjectively, 32-week size fetus with cardiac activity and cephalic presentation. Is that right?
Correct.
But then you also did another exam. You did an abdominal exam, and you marked that in your records, right?
Correct.
And you marked in your record that there was a fundal height, it's fundal HT, 32 centimeters. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the fundal height, can you tell us why? Well, I think you already did. How often did you do a fundal height exam, and when does that start for a pregnant woman?
Somewhere around 16 weeks gestation is around the earliest that you can feel the top of the fundus of the uterus, and then around 20 weeks gestation, it really should track approximately 1 centimeter of fundal height per week of gestation.
How many babies do you think you've delivered in your 23-year career?
6,000 to 7,000.
And you described you did deliver Skylar and her brother Jackson.
That's true.
How many women do you think have been under your care in your time as an obstetrician?
25,000.
Okay. Do you have a standard practice when you measure fundal heights? How would you measure them with this tape, which has been identified as State's Defense Exhibit RR? Is this how you would measure it? May I approach your Honor?
Amen.
Is this what you would use to measure a woman's fundal height?
Yes.
And that's your standard practice, correct?
Correct.
You don't mark something in your chart precisely 32 centimeters fundal height unless you actually got a 32 centimeter fundal height. Is that right?
That would be my practice, yes.
And what we're referring to in the records, let me display this, and let me know if you cannot see it on your screen, Doctor. I highlighted a few things here. This is your record. Abdomen, can you read that?
Yes.
And that's an abdominal examination, fundal height, 32 centimeters. That's what we're referring to with that measurement, is that right?
Correct.
And the things above that, the physical examination about eyes and chest and cardiovascular, that's Skylar, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And also in your record, page 26, there's a note, NOB and SONO in 1 week, is that right?
Correct.
What's that mean?
New OB is, NOB stands shorthand for new obstetrical patient, or new OB, new obstetrics.
And what does Ensono in 1 week mean?
Ensono in ultrasound.
Okay. The 32 centimeter fundal height that you gathered when you measured Skylar, that corresponds, if I understand you correctly, every centimeter should be weeks gestation of the fetus. Is that right?
Correct.
And if we now know that at the time you saw Skylar on April 26th, she was actually 37 to 39 weeks pregnant, what would that mean to you as an obstetrician?
Well, that would have meant that she was much smaller than expected, and that would have meant that since it's more than 2 centimeters smaller, that would have required explanation.
And if she had been only 3 centimeters smaller, so if you had measured 34 and she was really 37, or if she measured 35 and she's really 39, what would that tell you? What would be the concern?
Well, the concern in general is that potentially the fetus wasn't growing adequately.
And is there a term for that in your profession?
Intrauterine growth restriction.
And what is intrauterine growth restriction?
Well, for a variety of different reasons, if the fetus isn't getting enough nutrition, enough oxygenation, if there's compromise of the placenta, if the fetus has a genetic abnormality, it may not grow appropriately, and or may stop growing in the uterus.
Higher risk of a stillborn?
Intrauterine growth restriction is associated with a higher risk of stillborn.
And when there is intrauterine growth restriction, it impacts the umbilical cord fluid. Is that correct?
So intrauterine growth restriction is an indication of potentially one problem that may cause it is a failure of the placenta to adequately exchange nutrients and oxygen. Another indicator that there may not be adequate flow through the placenta could be a lack of fluid around the baby. That's one of the earlier indicators of a problem with the pregnancy in general. So there's a term when there's low fluid around the fetus. It's called oligohydramnios, which really just is oligo, meaning low, and hydramnios, meaning fluid.
And a heartbeat, having a normal heart rate, does not mean that the baby's not growth restricted. Is that right?
That's correct. As I said earlier, one of the last things to change would be, if there was something wrong with the pregnancy, one of the last things to change would be the heart rate. So one of the earlier things to change might be the fluid around the fetus. And the problem with looking at growth is that it takes a long time to look at fetal growth. You can't look with ultrasound one day and then look again with an ultrasound the next day and say there's been any significant growth. So in the hands of experts, they might be able to say there's been appreciable growth if you had two different, say, ultrasounds with complete measurements in maybe 2 weeks. You might look at ultrasounds in the hands of an expert as little as every week if you were just looking at the fluid around the fetus to see if that was adequate.
And the purpose of your ultrasound, the transabdominal ultrasound that you did on April 26th, was not to do a full assessment of the amniotic fluid. Is that right?
No.
Meaning that is correct. You did not look at the amniotic fluid.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what, if the cord breaks during delivery or just before delivery, the umbilical cord, what is that a sign of? What does that tell you as an obstetrician?
Well, if the cord is very short, it may mean that the fetus didn't have enough distance between the placenta and whatever out of the vagina is, and so that there may have been too much tension that could break. But if a cord, the umbilical cord is typically coiled. Imagine a short, flat, skinny cord is like a piece of wire, and a coiled cord that is thick and robust is like a slinky. And that slinky has structural integrity to it. And so if the cord is thin and skinny, it doesn't have any elasticity to it, so it's more prone to breaking.
And the thin and skinny cord is an unhealthy cord.
It could be associated with a pregnancy that has not developed normally.
Is bleeding in the third trimester a risk of stillborn, risk of pregnancy?
Yes.
And in your charts, it's listed last menses last month. What does that mean?
So when I spoke to Skylar about when the last time she had a menstrual period was, she indicated that it had been, if the month that we have in question is April, I assumed that to mean March.
And we know it wasn't a menstrual cycle, right?
Yes, we do know that.
And sometimes women can bleed during pregnancy, correct?
For concerning reasons and for not concerning reasons, but yes.
And it's more concerning if there's blood in the third trimester than the first, right?
Yes.
When you ask Skylar to give a urine sample for the pregnancy test, she volunteered and gave you the sample, correct?
Yes.
And after you told her that she was pregnant, she permitted you to do the transabdominal ultrasound, correct?
Correct.
Does malnutrition or women with eating disorders, does that increase the odds of a stillborn in your practice and experience?
Yes.
You've had the experience of delivering stillbirths in your practice?
That's true.
And you've had experience with miscarriages?
Yes.
How does your practice, how do the doctors in your practice and the nurses handle a stillborn delivery, right after the delivery?
We would generally get the baby, wrap the baby in a blanket as we would with a live-born baby, cut the cord, and then we've usually had a discussion with that mother before the delivery as to whether or not they would like to hold the stillborn baby. And if they're amenable to that, we usually present the wrapped baby to the mother.
When you saw Skylar on April 26th, I believe you testified that you told her she would deliver within 10 weeks. Is that right?
That's true.
And when you called Skylar, there was no voicemail set up.
That's true.
So you were unable to leave her a voicemail.
Correct.
And you told her that she should follow up with your office within 1 week.
Correct.
Or for the sono, which is an ultrasound?
Yes.
And that's reflective in your chart on page 26. NOB and sono in 1 week.
Correct.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Mr. Ricker showed you that tape that you indicated that you would typically use in measuring fundal height. Is that right?
Yes.
But again, you recall in this case, the detective specifically asked you whether you used a tape measure, and you indicated that you just used your hand. Do you recall hearing that?
That's in the transcript from.
Yes.
I do recall reading that at this point, yes.
Okay. So again, you were specifically asked, did you use a tape measure? And at that time, just months after the incident, not years, you indicated you just used your hand.
Well, I would have used my hands whether I was using the tape or not using the tape. My hand has to be used in order to establish where the fundus is. But so I guess using my hands, I don't know what my context was at the time. It could very well be I wasn't using ultrasound, I wasn't using any other method. But yes.
Do you think when she asked you about the tape, whether you used a tape measure and you said that you just used your hand, do you think that when you said
Objection, improper characterization of the prior interview, Your Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead and continue.
So you think that maybe when you said I just used my hand, you meant that you just used your hand to hold the tape measure?
I don't have any independent recollection of what I used at the time of the measurement. What I do know now is that, well, one, I know that I recorded a very specific number in the chart. So it would make sense that I was measuring with a measuring device.
And we also know that back then you said hand.
Yes.
Okay. With respect to the 32 centimeter measurement, again, that can be plus or minus 3 or 4 weeks. You agreed with me before, is that right?
Yes.
So that meant that at the time that she saw you on April 26th of 2017, she could have been 35 to 36 weeks.
Yes.
And you were asked a lot of questions about IUGR. You saw Brooke one time on April 26th, is that right?
Correct.
You did a very quick fundal height measurement, either by hand or tape now, and you did a very brief ultrasound, is that right?
Yes.
You're not here telling this jury that you believe that she had an IUGR baby, is that right? You're not making that diagnosis.
I could not have made that diagnosis at the time of the visit.
One moment, Your Honor.
Mr. Rickers?
Is it possible that your 32 centimeter fundal height measurement could be off by 3 to 4 weeks? Of course it's possible because it was, correct?
Yes.
And if it is off by more than two weeks, what's that mean?
Well, if it's 2 weeks below a known gestational age or 4 weeks above a known gestational age, that would be of concern and would warrant additional testing, which might involve getting an ultrasound to determine, is the baby too big or is the baby too small?
So when you say it's possible that it could be off by 3 to 4 weeks, we're not talking about you measuring incorrectly 3 to 4 centimeters when you use this tape, is that correct?
Correct.
And you've done a fundal height measurement tens of thousands of times?
Yes.
And your standard practice, if you write down a specific number in your chart, is that you use this tape?
That's true.
Tens of thousands of times?
Correct.
And if you measure 32 centimeters and a woman is actually 35 or 37 or 39 weeks gestation, that is indicative that she has intrauterine growth restriction, correct?
That's certainly a possibility.
Very much so. It's not just 3 centimeters, correct?
I'm sorry, it's more than 2 centimeters less than. If the gestational age is known to be 32 weeks gestation and the measurement is more than if the gestational age was known to be 34 weeks gestation and the fundal height, a reliable fundal height, is 32 weeks gestation, that is worthy of, I should say, more than 2 centimeters below. So if it was the gestational age is known to be 35 weeks gestation and the measurement is 32, that would warrant additional testing.
Because it indicates there might be a problem.
Correct.
And a likely problem, obstetricians are told, look for likely problems. The likely problem here would be growth restricted fetus, right?
Growth restriction or oligohydramnios, both of which could be an indication that the fetus is not growing adequately or that there is compromise of that connection between the placenta and the uterus.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Doctor. You can step down. Next witness.
I'm stopping it right there in between witnesses to answer Baby Kiss's question as to whether they found the baby or not. Sadly, they did. Right in the backyard where Skylar buried the baby. Now the thing is, though, they found the skeletal remains of the baby with some charring on the bone. When interrogated, Skylar admitted that she tried to, quote, cremate the baby just a little. You do the math. But you can see, but just off of that, you can see where the abuse of a corpse claim is coming from. Another set of twins. I lost one. My neighbor's youngest son's twin. My body absorbed the other. Oh, let me go ahead and give you guys a heads up. Like I said earlier, because of the how important the medical personnel's testimony is, what I'm gonna do is play this whole thing. That way, we can get a professional's idea as to the care of a woman who is pregnant by this medical staff, and I will start part 2 of this case tomorrow morning, which will be about 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, my time, 2 o'clock on the east for you guys in the east. Bottom line, you're not gonna miss. I'm gonna make sure you do not miss a beat on this case. Hey, this is Throwback. This is Ohio versus Richardson. It's BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded, and we're gonna continue with more testimony. This time we're about to hear from Allison Campbell.
The state would call Allison Campbell.
Ms. Campbell has also requested that she not be filmed or videotaped.
Proceedings to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. We'll be seated.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Thank you. Ma'am, would you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
It's Allison Campbell, Campbell.
Ma'am, where were you employed in 2017?
At Hilltop OBGYN.
And how long did you work there?
7 years.
What was your position there, ma'am?
I was the clinical supervisor.
And what did your duties consist of?
Basically supervising the nursing staff, working with the physicians. I did help with the higher risk OB patients or gynecology patients as well.
I want to direct your attention to April of 2017. Did you become aware that a patient by the name of Brooke Richardson was seen at your office on April 26th of 2017?
Yes.
Ma'am, did you have any interaction with Ms. Richardson on the 26th of April?
No, I did not.
Okay. And how did you become involved then?
Dr. Andrew had come to me to ask me to reach out to her because he noticed she had not made a return appointment to be seen, and he wanted me to try to contact her to set that appointment date, as well as at the time her insurance was out of network with Premier Health, so we were going to try to make sure we had care established to do a continuation of care.
And did you follow Dr. Andrews' directive? Did you attempt to make contact with Ms. Richardson to get her back into the practice?
Yes, I did. I tried to call, but was not able to reach her. So no, I did not speak with her directly.
Do you recall how many times you tried to get in touch with her?
Twice, I believe.
Okay. Do you recall, were you able to leave a voicemail? Do you remember?
I do not. I don't remember. I believe it was either the voicemail was full or not set up.
Okay. But 2 separate times you tried to call her in an effort to get her back in?
Yes.
Are you aware whether she ever scheduled an appointment during that time period in April to come back in and be seen?
No, she did not.
Did you ever try to call her parents or her mother?
No, I did not.
What would be the reason for that?
She was 18, and medical consent had not been given to anyone, so I, under HIPAA, am unable to speak with anyone about her medical records.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Mr. Rickers, you may inquire.
Hi, Ms. Campbell.
Hi.
It's not uncommon for you or people in your group to call a patient to establish a continuation of care. Is that right?
That is correct.
And because it's important to give follow-up care, right?
Yes.
And it's important for insurance purposes to establish, I think Dr. Andrews said, within a week or week and a half.
Yes.
I have no, the voicemail, you were not able to leave a voicemail.
No,
right?
I was not.
I have no further questions.
Anything else, Mr. Kennedy? All right, thank you, ma'am. You can step down.
Let me try this again. Now that I'm unmuted. Apparently she didn't want to be involved in the case. That's the reason why her testimony was so brief. Now, speaking of which, now we're going to move onward to Dr. Casey Boyce, who may have a lot more to offer and likely to back up what was testified to by Dr. William Andrew earlier.
You may. Remember the cautions that I have already given you. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Also, do not begin to form opinions about how the case should be decided. Also, you need to stay away from any media coverage or corpus delicti for potentially inculpatory statements of the defendant. Do we want to make a record on that?
Yes, please, Your Honor. Your Honor, the defense's position on that is that the corpus delicti rule in this state, at this point, they can't offer any inculpatory statements of Ms. Richardson because they have not established independent evidence of a crime. So specifically, at that point, it was the statement from Ms. Richardson to Dr. Boyce was when we made the objection, as well as if they're going to go into crime scene photographs as was indicated at sidebar. All of that is derivative from her statements to the police. And at this time, they have not established the rule and that independent evidence of a crime existed, and ergo, we can't hear that evidence until that is done.
Is it the defense's position that it's just that I have not yet heard it in their case in chief, or that I am not going to hear it at all with regard to the corpus delicti?
At this point, based on what we've heard, we have not heard it in their case in chief. Whether or not they establish it through an order of different witnesses is undetermined at this point. But based on when we made the objection, what we have right now, they have not established independent proof of a crime, and therefore we can't hear any evidence that's based on those inculpatory statements.
Does the defense concede that once we reach the point where the state offers evidence of a body, that the corpus delicti rule has been satisfied?
No, because that was established through the statements that she gave them. And this is a very unique case because in most cases where you would have someone who was noticed to be missing, right? We were all born, everyone knew that we were there, and then we went missing. Someone could say, well, they're missing. They have not established a live birth in this case and told us that they can establish a live birth in this case. Ergo, we can't hear inculpatory statements to prove that point because that's what the corpus delicti rule says. It's supposed to get around basing a case on this defendant's statements and those alone. And what offering evidence of a body doesn't meet that rule in this case, Your Honor, because of the uniqueness of the case.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Knippen, Ms. Kraft, does the state wish to be heard on this issue?
Your Honor, I guess I would disagree with defense counsel. I think that Ms. Richardson's dead baby that was excavated from the yard behind her home is evidence of the fact that she committed a crime. So I don't fully understand the defense argument.
All right, well, I mean, the corpus delicti rule is designed to prevent a defendant's confession from being used against that defendant for a crime that never happened. And it requires a very minimal amount of independent proof of the body of the substance of the crime, meaning the act and the criminal agency of the act. Court notes that there was a body that was recovered in an area adjacent to the defendant. This evidence is sufficient to establish that a crime may have occurred and satisfies the corpus delicti rule for admitting the statements of the defendant, which are potentially inculpatory. But your objection is noted and overruled for the record. Is there anything else we need to talk about before we get going again?
How late do you plan to go today, Your Honor?
Depends on the jury. I've not asked the jury what their preference on going late, but you guys all know my position on this. If we can add a half an hour to every day in a 2-week trial, we've just eliminated an entire day of trial. So I like to go as long as everybody is comfortable. But I do not want the jury pushing past their point where they can either pay attention or whether they might be distracted by other business that's going on at home. So I will have Mr. Mullins inquire of them when they return from lunch. My thought would be to plan on going until 4:30 and probably adjourning somewhere in the 4:30 to 5:30 range. although I know that we're getting into crime scene photos, and that might sort of guide how we go.
Well, because of that, we've got 5 witnesses that are going to potentially talk about that, and then our 6th witness would be somebody that's driving from Montgomery County. So my thought would be not to have them here, but that may mean we end at like 4 o'clock today, or we can see if that person can come down here, but I don't know then that we would be able to get her on.
Okay, if we bring the witness down from Montgomery County, we'll get her on, him or her on today, if that's what you want to do.
I think I would prefer just to put on the 5 witnesses and stop if the court's okay with that.
Okay. Well, we'll see where we're at the first, so at our like 2:30 break, we'll kind of see where we're at and we'll know.
Okay.
All right. We're in recess.
Or purpose for that appointment?
Birth control refill.
And you said that was a refill?
Yes.
Doctor, on that date, were you aware that she had previously seen one of your colleagues, Dr. Andrew?
Yes.
And that that appointment occurred on April 26th of 2017?
Yes.
When you, prior to that, the actual appointment on July 12th, what information did you have about the prior appointment on April 26th?
Dr. Andrew took me in a little conference room and told me that he had seen her previously and that she had been pregnant.
Did he indicate to you at that previous appointment that she had come in for birth control at that time as well?
Yes.
And you said that she was pregnant?
Yes.
Was it your understanding that he was the doctor that in fact confirmed the pregnancy for her?
Yes.
Do you have any understanding as to why she wasn't returning to him on this appointment on July 12th?
I did not know why.
Okay. Any information about her demeanor at that prior appointment?
He said she was tearful and upset when she was told she was pregnant.
Okay. Did he give you any indication about whether or not she had made statements about not being able to have that baby or not being able to tell anyone about the baby?
He had said that she had said not to tell her mom.
Okay. Did you have any understanding after he had diagnosed or confirmed her pregnancy on April 26th as to whether or not she scheduled any of the follow-up appointments that he wanted her to have?
She had not been seen at our practice since that appointment.
Okay, thank you. So on that date, how did you first come into contact with Miss Richardson?
I went in the exam room to see her like I do every other patient.
Had she already been checked in by another nurse?
By the medical assistant, yes.
Medical assistant, would that have been Ashley Sparkman?
Correct, yes.
Did Ashley give you any information that she had obtained when she checked Miss Richardson in prior to you going into the exam room?
I don't remember her saying anything other than she is here and she's ready for you to see her.
Okay. Did she give you any indication of whether or not she still appeared to be pregnant?
She did say she doesn't look pregnant.
Okay. And did she give you any indication about what her demeanor was or how she was acting in the exam room?
I don't remember.
Okay, thank you. After speaking with Ashley, did you then go into the exam room yourself?
Yes.
And when you go in there, how does the conversation start? Walk us through it, if you will.
I walk in, I always introduce myself, say I'm Dr. Casey Boyce, it's nice to see you. I sit down, I say what brings you in today, and she says to get a refill on her birth control, and then I say, okay, I'll be happy to do that, but you know I have to ask you, the last time you were here, you were pregnant and you're no longer pregnant. What happened?
And how did she respond at that time, doctor?
She started crying.
And did she give you any indication as to what happened to the child that she was pregnant with on April 26th?
Yes, she started sobbing and she said, I had it alone in my house and I buried it in my backyard.
And when you heard this information from her, what did you do in response?
I asked a few more questions. I was kind of in a state of shock. I said, does anyone know about this? And she said, no. I said, no one heard you have the baby. She said, no. I said, labor is incredibly painful. And she started crying harder and said, yes, it's awful. I said, no one knows. And she said, no. And I said, I'm the first person on the planet you've ever told? Yes. She said she cleaned everything up and buried it in the backyard and nobody knew.
Okay. Let me go through that with you a little bit. When you tried to ask her some questions to ascertain what had happened, did she indicate to you when she started cramping or when she believed she was going into labor?
Sometime earlier that day.
Okay. And did she indicate to you, do you recall when she had the baby?
In the middle of the night.
And would that have been on May 7th of 2017?
That's what she said, yes. May 7th in the middle of the night.
So she has the baby May 7th, 2017 in the middle of the night, started cramping earlier that day?
Yes.
And did she indicate to you at that time when she started cramping earlier that day that she knew or had suspicion of what was happening?
Yes, she said she had felt some pain and kind of knew what was going to happen.
Okay. And then she goes into labor in the middle of the night?
Yes.
Okay. Did she indicate to you where in the house she had the baby?
I don't remember that anymore.
You don't remember that anymore? What do you mean?
We just rewatched the statement that I made to the police.
Mm-hmm.
And in the statement to the police, I said in her bedroom. I don't remember those details anymore.
Okay, well, it's been 2 years, correct?
Correct.
It's been a long time. Actually, we're more than 2 years out at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But you said you, and let me back up for a little. You recall giving a statement to the police at the time the investigation occurred?
Correct.
And it was recorded?
Correct.
And that interview or statement that you gave to the police, you would agree it was, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it was made within days of you making a report to the police?
Correct.
Okay. And you said you've had an opportunity to review that recording?
Yes.
And when you made that statement within days of having that appointment, that interaction with the defendant, you recalled her telling you that the child was born in the bedroom?
That's what I said then.
And then after that, what did she say next?
I don't remember the exact sequence of details.
To the best that you can.
But I did offer to do a physical exam and she declined. And I said that there can be some, I don't know what word I used then, some trauma or changes. And she declined and I did not push it. And I encouraged her to get counseling because this was something that she would need professional help for.
Okay. When she said that she buried everything, did she tell you what everything was?
Not that I remember.
You don't know if that included, and I'll start using some terms here, but the placenta, the afterbirth, all of those things?
I don't remember that she used any details, just everything.
Everything was buried?
Yeah.
And that was in her backyard?
Yes.
Did she ever make any statements to you about the condition of the umbilical cord?
She did not.
She never made a statement about it being wrapped around the baby's neck?
No.
She never made a statement about it not being attached to the baby?
No, not that I recall.
Or a statement about it not being attached to the placenta?
No.
No statements. You said that you asked her who else knew. Did she indicate if other people were home at the time?
Yes, I asked her if there was anyone else in the house, and she said yes.
And do you remember questioning her or asking her about how it was possible that no one would have heard her? Because as you said, it's a painful experience.
Yes, I said, I think that's when I brought up, it's an incredibly painful, awful process, and she said yes, and I said, no one heard you, no one knew, and she said no.
Do you recall her telling you that she did not want anyone to know?
I don't remember her ever saying she didn't want anyone to know, but she didn't want me to tell anyone about that I knew.
Okay. And you said when you explained to her that it was an awful, very painful process?
Correct, labor.
And she agreed with you that it was?
Yes.
Did she give you any indication how she was able to remain silent throughout that process?
She did not.
Okay. And doctor, I'm going to assume most people in the jury have some experience with childbirth, but when you say it's a very awful, painful experience, what do you mean?
When you go through childbirth, it is almost considered a trauma. Your uterus is a big, huge muscle. It contracts. Those contractions are very painful. The baby's head and shoulders delivering out through the birth canal, through the vagina. That area has never been stretched that far. It's very painful. You can have significant tears. It's just a painful, traumatic experience, change in your body.
And in your experience as a doctor, how many babies have you delivered?
In my lifetime?
In your lifetime?
I don't know. Probably 1,000.
Okay. When there is no medication or numbing agent or anything like that used, is it typically a quiet experience?
Usually not, unless they're very motivated, and usually not.
Thank you. And so as she's sharing this information with you, I believe you said you asked her, so nobody knows I'm the first person.
Yes.
And she confirmed that since May 7th, she had not disclosed to anyone that she had given birth to a child.
Correct.
Or that that child was buried in the backyard.
Correct.
You said that you then told her you wanted to perform an internal examination. And why is that, doctor? What is your concern at that time, and why do you think that an internal examination is necessary?
As I said, when you have a childbirth, sometimes the area is stretched. You can have a laceration or tear, and usually we repair that at the time. So I just wanted to make sure that her perineum, her body, her vagina had healed properly from the delivery.
And you said that she declined to let you perform that exam?
Correct.
Did she give you any explanation as to why she would not let you perform the exam?
No, she just said no, and I wasn't going to push it.
When you said that you weren't going to push it, was that because you had no concerns about the physical state of her body, or just because of her mental state at that point?
Because she was so upset, and everything, it had been so far out. People were completely healed 6 weeks out, so there's not really anything that I could do to help at that point in time.
Doctor, did you ultimately refill her prescription for the birth control?
I did.
And then you said after that you gave her some counseling or some advice?
I told her that she should seek counseling and professional help because this was a traumatic psychological event, and that she would need help to cope and get past this.
After that visit or that appointment concluded, did you have any further contact with her?
No.
After she left that day, did you have a conference with Dr. Andrew again?
I did.
And did you ultimately confer with legal counsel?
We did.
And did you make a decision based on the information that Dr. Andrew had and the information that you had to notify the police?
Correct, yes.
Your Honor, if I may have one moment.
You may. Mr. Rupert, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, Dr. Boyce.
Good afternoon.
It's a common part of your practice to have the different doctors in your group see the same patient, right?
Correct, yes.
And it is typical that you and Dr. Andrew might both, on separate occasions, see the same patient.
Yes.
When Skylar described what happened on May 7th, she described a dead baby, correct?
Correct.
And she did not have to come back to Hilltop on July 12th, right?
No.
But she did.
Yes.
And she gave you the exact date when she had the delivery, correct?
Yes, May 7th.
And she told you that she buried her in her backyard, correct?
Correct.
And when she told you about her stillbirth, you believed her, correct?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll sustain the objection, but you're able to disregard that last response.
When she told you about her baby, she actually cried visible tears, correct?
Yes.
And people in your office, on your staff, could hear her sobbing through the walls of the exam room, correct?
Correct.
And that's while she was describing her stillbirth.
Correct.
And when you talked to the police in July or August of 2017, you just repeated things from memory and didn't think that the prosecutor's office might make a big deal about whether or not Skylar said in the bedroom or bathroom. Is that right?
Correct.
And now, thinking back on it, you don't know what Skylar told you about where she had her baby. Is that right?
I do not remember that detail.
The prosecutor asked you if Skylar said she never had to cut the umbilical cord. Do you remember that question?
What was your question?
She asked you if Skylar said, I didn't have to cut the cord. The
Correct.
prosecutor asked you that.
Correct.
Did you ask her if she had to cut the cord?
I did not.
Did you ask her any specifics about the umbilical cord?
I did not.
You practiced Hilltop for how long?
12 years.
And I think you just testified that you delivered over 1,000 babies.
That's an approximate guess, yes.
Okay, about 1,000, a lot.
A lot.
And you see a number of pregnant women as part of your weekly practice, correct?
Yes.
As part of your weekly practice, I want to talk to you a little bit about fundal height measurements.
Okay.
Do you use this tape when you take a fundal height measurement as part of your weekly practice?
Yes.
And when do you take a fundal height measurement?
After 20 weeks.
And how often after 20 weeks would you take a fundal height measurement?
Usually every appointment.
Why is that important?
The fundal height, which is a measurement from the top of the pubic bone to the top of the uterus, should measure within 2 centimeters of the number of weeks of a patient.
And if it's smaller by outside of 2 centimeters, what does that indicate to you?
That the baby might be smaller than it should be.
And can that be a problem?
Yes.
Records are critical in your practice, is that correct?
Correct.
Record keeping?
Yes.
In your practice, you keep records electronically, correct?
Correct.
And all of your doctors practice the same or similar record keeping techniques, correct?
I object as to what other doctors do.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer.
Correct.
And if someone were to write down in a chart fundal height 32 centimeters, what does that tell you as a doctor?
That the pregnancy should be between 30 and 34 weeks along.
And this sounds like a very obvious question, but that fundal height 32 centimeters in a record, what does that tell you about the patient's fundal height?
That he measured it, and that's what he got.
Thank you. Would you write some specific number in a chart if you didn't take a measurement?
No.
And that's because you rely on charts and notations every day as part of your good practice.
Correct.
And you're aware that on April 26th, Skylar was measuring 32 centimeters, correct?
That is what Dr. Andrew wrote.
And he also took a US transabdominal, that's an ultrasound?
Ultrasound.
And in that, he also measured 32 centimeters, is that right?
Yes. Or 32 weeks.
32 weeks.
Yes.
Yes.
He didn't measure anything as 32 centimeters.
Thank you. Thank you. And we all know now that May 7th, when Skylar delivered, was actually only 11 days later, right?
Correct.
And so if Skylar was full term, 11 days later, was that fundal height measurement of 32 off by greater than 2 centimeters?
Yes.
Much smaller.
Correct.
And as part of your everyday practice, you stay up to date with medical literature, correct?
Yes.
And in your 12 years of experience, you've had a lot of experience with different types of pregnancies, correct?
Yes.
What can you tell us what the concerns would be if someone is growth restricted, intrauterine growth restriction?
If the baby is small, which is what intrauterine growth restriction means, the baby is smaller, measuring smaller than the number of weeks or the gestation that you think the baby is, then you are concerned that of why that is, and if the placenta is not working as well, and if the baby's not getting the nutrition that it needs.
Is the baby at a higher risk for a stillbirth?
Yes.
Is there more likely less amniotic fluid?
There can be, not always, but yes.
It's more likely.
Sometimes they go hand in hand.
Would be more likely with growth restriction that there could be a weaker umbilical cord.
It can be something that goes hand in hand with it, but it's not always growth restriction in small cord.
Okay. And if someone measures 4 to 6 centimeters too small on a fundal height measurement, that's a significant, much greater risk of a stillbirth. Is that correct?
Yes, it's more concerning the more centimeters it's off by.
And a stillbirth baby would be white, correct?
Yes,
Eyes closed.
usually.
Sometimes the cord not attached.
I've never had that.
Okay. What does that tell you if the cord is not attached to the placenta?
The cord is what gets all the baby's oxygen and nutrition from the placenta to the baby.
What would it tell you if the placenta delivered at the exact same time or right after the baby?
That's not normal. It can mean an abruption. Abruption is when the placenta lets loose from the uterus. And again, if that happens, the baby's not getting the nutrition that it needs. It can mean that maybe that stillbirth happened a while ago, and so it all came out at the same time.
And when we say a while ago, we're talking like several hours, not like weeks, correct?
Correct. Yes, hours or days.
I'd like you to take us all into the delivery room.
Okay.
Imagine you're standing there right now. What do you often see in a delivery room?
There's the patient on the bed, her family. The patient has a nurse. There's usually a tech that sets up my table and is there to support the nurse. There's a nursery nurse for the baby and a respiratory therapist for the baby. There's the computers for the nurses, and there is the computers for the fetal heart rate tracing.
And what instruments do you have ready at hand as a doctor?
There's a whole table. I have 2 sets of clamps, 2 sets of scissors, laps, towels. I have a gown, gloves, syringes, basins to put things in.
I want to talk, you mentioned placental abruption. Now, placental abruption, it can be chronic, correct?
Correct.
What's that mean?
That the patient has some bleeding, but the baby looks okay and is growing okay. That just a little bit of the placenta lets go, so they're graded by percentages.
And if there's a reported bleeding in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, is that a cause for concern?
We usually have the patients come in if they have bleeding.
Have you had the experience of delivering mothers who've had delivering babies who are stillborn?
Yes.
And how many babies do you think your whole practice delivers in any given week?
We deliver 2 to 3 babies a day, so 14 to 21 on average.
And sometimes you could deliver as many as like 3 stillborns in 1 week?
Sometimes 3 in 1 week, and sometimes not for several months.
May I have one moment, Your Honor? cord and details. I just want to make sure we're clear. You had no discussion. You never asked Skylar about the umbilical cord.
Correct. I never asked her any specific questions about the umbilical cord.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, you were not present for the April 26th appointment, correct?
Correct.
So you do not know what happened in that examination room?
Correct.
And if, not talking about what's usual or customary, talking about what is, okay?
Okay.
If Dr. Andrew gave a statement to the investigator saying that he never used this measuring tape, but that he used his hands and did the fundal height measurement he approximated with his hands, you don't know that not to be true, do you?
I don't. Correct.
And so just because there's a number of 32 centimeters in the documentation from the examination on April 26th, you yourself have no personal knowledge of how that was obtained.
Correct. I do not.
And so if he says hands, you would accept that as true?
Yes.
Objection. It's
Overruled.
Now, when she came to you on July 12th and the defense was asking you, did she talk to you about the umbilical cord? She didn't volunteer any information about the umbilical cord, did she?
Correct. No.
Did she volunteer any information about the color of the baby?
No.
She didn't tell you white, pink, gray, dusky, any of that?
No.
Did she, when she told you everything was buried, I think I asked you this, she didn't tell you what everything is?
Correct.
She never gave you any specific information as to when the placenta and the afterbirth and everything came out?
Correct.
So you have only the information that she chose to provide to you on that day?
Correct.
And when the defense asks you if she didn't have to come back to your practice, you said correct. But would it also be fair to say you don't know what her family arrangements are with her mom?
Correct.
You don't know what their insurance arrangements are?
Correct.
You don't know who was involved in making or scheduling any of the appointments?
Correct. I have no idea.
So from a technical sense, she's not obligated to come back to you, but that's as much as you would know about why she would or wouldn't return.
Correct.
This fundal height measurement that was done with the hands and the abdominal ultrasound, and we've heard some testimony that they...
objection. That's not the testimony. They did it with his hand.
The objection is overruled. Go ahead and finish your question.
Thank you. We've heard from Dr. Andrew that they corroborated each other, that they corresponded late third trimester or into the third trimester, I guess. You would agree that those are both screening tools?
Yes, approximates.
Approximates. They're not definitive?
Correct.
And that's perhaps why Dr. Andrew wanted to get the more formal ultrasound so he could get measurements, bone length, a multitude of measurements to determine exactly what the age of the child was.
Correct.
And you're aware that that never occurred?
Correct, yes.
And when we say that these measurements are screening tools, they're not definites, would you agree that sometimes they can be off by 3 to 4 centimeters?
If the gestation and the fundal height are off by more than 2 centimeters, then we get an ultrasound to get a definitive answer.
Which you weren't able to do in this case, correct?
Correct.
So you don't know if they were or were not off by more than 3 centimeters?
Correct.
But they could be?
They could have been.
So if our best guess is that she measured at 32 centimeters and it could be off by 3 centimeters, that could get you to 35 centimeters, and then if she has a baby approximately 2 weeks later, we might be up to 37 centimeters now.
Yes.
Is it also fair to say that some people just have smaller babies?
Yes.
And sometimes smaller people have constitutionally smaller babies?
Correct.
Just because you have a smaller baby, does that necessarily mean it was growth restricted?
No.
And have you been provided with any evidence in this case to suggest that the defendant did or did not have a smaller baby?
No.
You don't know the size of the baby
I don't
at the
know.
child's birth?
Correct.
I want to go back over one other thing. You agree when you gave the interview to the detectives, it was within a day or days of making the report to the police?
Yes.
And do you recall at that time that you didn't hesitate, you didn't think about it, but you definitively said she reported the child was born in the bedroom?
That's what I said on the video that I watched.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Rickers? Briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Boyce, going back to charting and this fundal height measurement, if you write down a fundal height measurement in a chart, would you ever not use this measuring tape or something to actually measure the fundal height?
I wouldn't.
And this is something that you and your doctors do in your group thousands of times over the years, right?
Correct.
You asked Skylar no details about her stillbirth when she talked to you on July 12th. Is that right?
Correct.
And is it uncommon for a mother to not want to discuss the details after having a stillborn?
Everybody's different after a stillborn. Sometimes they want to discuss everything, and sometimes they don't want to discuss anything.
And you have a group that I think is affiliated with your hospital. It's called HEAL.
Correct.
What is that?
HEAL stands for Help Endure a Loss, and it's a support group for people that have had miscarriages or fetal losses or newborn losses.
And you recommended, when you talked to Skylar, you recommended she get into some counseling or therapy groups, right?
Correct.
And it's not uncommon for a mother to blame herself for a stillborn, is that right?
Correct.
One minute, Your Honor. When Skylar was with you on July 12th, and when she was crying and speaking through her tears, she told you that she delivered a baby and it was not alive. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness?
I believe we are. Yep, we've wrapped up the testimony from. We have wrapped up the testimony from all the medical experts, and as far as how many abortion clinics are there in Ohio, let me see if I can get that information real quick. As of 2017, there were 17 abortion clinics. 14 facilities providing abortion, and 9 of them were clinics. All right, so there we are. We've wrapped up the. Thank you. I'll be back in normal clothes tomorrow morning. But as of right now, we've wrapped up all of the testimony from the medical experts, and tomorrow morning we're gonna kick things off with law enforcement testimony, including that of Lieutenant John Fain. Plus, we'll have testimony from Dr. Susan Brown, Krista Lathan, Dr. Kim Brady. Lieutenant John Fain will be back on the stand a second time, and so much more, because as I promised, we're going to take this thing all the way from victim all the way to verdict. So there you have it. Part 1 is in the books. So be ready for part 2 tomorrow. Same time, same place. BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded, your home for news, opinions, debates, your voice, throwback cases, and justice served. And like I said, I want to as much as I'm keeping this going, I want to give more suggestions for other cases. I thought about going over the Darrell Brooks case out of Wisconsin. If you remember Darrell Brooks and what he did, and ran his car through a parade, and that part was just nuts. But like I said, I'll be back tomorrow morning with part 2. We'll start with law enforcement testimony and more evidence, including the interrogation. I'm glad the dumbest criminal. Ladies and gentlemen, Baby Kisses refers to him as the dumbest criminal. Let me remind you of this. I'll give you something to think about. Because like I said, I thought about doing his case simply because of this adage. He who represents himself in court has a fool for a client. Think about that. I'm Ernest Bethea, the Last Outlaw. Thank you all so much for joining me for part 1 of Throwback, the state of Ohio versus Brooke, Skylar, Richardson. I'll be back tomorrow morning with part 2, and we're gonna keep on going with this until we reach the verdict in this case. And as we go on, I want you to think about this question by the time we reach the end of it. Was justice served in this case? Like I said in the intro, we will find out together. Baby Kisses, thanks for doing what you do in the chat. So tomorrow morning, I think I'm doing this about 2 o'clock Eastern time, 11 o'clock my time. So I will see you guys early afternoon, late morning. Until then, guys, you know what to do from here. Have a great Sunday, and bite this. Hey guys, this is the Last Outlaw saying thank you to all of you who watched this video and subscribe to BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded, your drama-free true crime destination. I couldn't dream of doing this without you, so thank you. Did you enjoy this presentation? Are you looking to get more information on everything presented here? Are you looking to give more feedback on this presentation? Here's what you can do. Like this video. The more eyes on this video, the more this information is spread to others, which brings us a step closer to justice served. Share this video to your social media. Just like dropping a like, the more eyes on this video, the closer we get to justice served. Drop me a comment, whether it's on the topic or the presentation. I am open to all comments, whether it's a theory, a speculation, or a suggestion. I will respond to all. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button to show your support of this little true crime engine, powered by you. Set the notification bell to all for future videos. Be sure to follow BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded all over social media. At BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded True Crime on Facebook. At EKB316 on X, formerly known as Twitter. At BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded on YouTube. At EKB316 on Instagram. At King of Hearts 316 2021 on TikTok. You can drop me an email as well. The address is kingofhearts316_09 at outlook.com. This is your home for news without the drama, where your opinions matter, for lively debates, where your voice is heard, and above all else, justice served. This is BETHEA'S BYTE, and it's reloaded.